so right.
So say, how are things different now to say post 2012 or leading up to 2012? And so how are things moved on?
So where we're at now and where we're heading, I think, is an increase and an acceleration of polarity. In other words, things are becoming more and more polarised. I think we've seen that clearly with Brexit, with the election of the orange one, with the possible election of Marine Le Pen in France. We're seeing extremity becoming more extreme. This is one of the rules of yin and yang, is that energy can become extreme and more extreme, but beyond a certain point there'll be a collapse and an absolute reformation or a reconfiguration. So I think we're on the move towards that extremity, and as long as that takes, there will be more dissonance, more political unrest, more financial collapse, more intense sociological change, and that will all be a very difficult kind of a time until it resolves into something that is, if you like, more stable and less volatile. So I think that is why the, if you like, collective fruits of our 21-year cycle together, teaching what we're teaching, what we've taught, I think that will stand people in very good stead, because I think times are basically going to become more challenging. So now it's 2017, it's a year of 10, so now is really time for people to stand up, step up, keep up with their practice, and to totally step into their identity as a spiritual being, as a carrier of light, and as a conscious, responsible person in the Aquarian age.
Don't you think that practice has to become much more life orientated, that you can hold that status wherever you are under whatever circumstances?
I think that's why that's what we've been training people to do. So yes, it's all very nice that people come here and we're in a kind of a Kundalini kind of love and light bubble when we're together, but the whole purpose of that is so that people can take it back to their homes, their families, where they work, and sustain that energy in a very practical way. And that's why one of your recent projects was going to be called Practical Spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because that's the point of it. It's we're not a kind of a monastic organisation, and we never set out to be that. Rather, Kundalini is the yoga of the householder to sustain people and give people that sort of resilience of spirit in the modern world, in the marketplace, in the everyday.
I think the next 3 or 4 years are going to be very, very challenging, and the light will become lighter. Consequently, the dark will become darker. And people who have been trained will be able to hold their space under any conditions.
Yeah.
The more challenging, the better, in a way. And it's only when that reaches a sort of fulcrum point will we come out the other side with a new ballpark, really.
Yeah.
There's some buzzwords around. I was fascinated to see that post-truth was a new word last year. And in a sense, truth is what we've all worked towards, is recognising and resonating with the truth. It comes back to that idea of holding a mirror up, is that if you look in the mirror, what do you see? Is this me? The fundamental thing of yoga, who am I? And the answering that for yourself, I won't say it's easy, but it's relatively easier. But it then begs the question of who are we? And that has definitely changed. It's that who are we wasn't a big question when we set out collectively. So I don't know, you wouldn't have had mobile phones, wouldn't have had computers at the stage we have now, but specifically wouldn't have social networking. And what's come, I'm not sure what the chronology of this, but now to be instantly in communication with any number of people across the world has fundamentally changed our awareness of who we are.
But truth is relative, isn't it? Because my truth may differ from your truth, may differ from Guru's truth, because it's perception, and our perception may be a bit like your eyes. What you perceive and what other people perceive may have a discrepancy.
Mm-hmm.
And part of, I think, today's world is really radical truth and good humour, where we take the comparison. I can remember walking down Hampstead High Street, I think, with you.
Yeah.
We were going to lunch. And I was just messing about, and I said to Guru, I hate being out with you, because everyone looks at you, all tall and white and weird. And he looked down on me from a great height and said, at least my customers know how to find me. And that really amused me and has stuck with me for years and years and years. Now that's a comparative truth. Both of us were telling our truth with good humour in a sort of very brother and sister type, bickering type way. But we were also showing each other that our truth isn't the ultimate truth, it's a truth.
Yeah. I believe there is an ultimate truth. But as we find our way to it, then the most honest thing we can say is, this is my truth. And the big thing to add to that is to recognise that just because it's my truth doesn't make it your truth. And
That's
to recognise that you may have a different aspect of that infinite truth. And again, that's part of that collective, is that turning back the clock, my truth was all there was. Whereas now recognising that we may each have our individual truths and they are equally valid. That moves us into this collective we of who are we. And this really is a question for an age, for recognising that there is a collective truth, and we can identify this at a level of commonality. And the one of the other challenges for our age will be, is this going to be the lowest common denominator, or can we recognise it at a higher common denominator? And because we're recognising it, and so you can have everyone in instant communication around the world, not everyone, but millions of people, but are they doing that to elevate and raise our consciousness, or are they doing that for less altruistic reasons, like your bum looks big in that?
Well, you'll be challenged all the way along the way. You'll either want to have loads of money or loads of power or loads of publicity or whatever, and they're constant challenges. They'll repeat and repeat and repeat. What we've been very short of, in my opinion, is inclusivity, which is compassion, tolerance, starting actually at home. It's often much easier to be sweetness and light outside the house, and when you go home you shout at the kids or whatever. To hold that steady through 24 hours, 7 days a week, under some very challenging circumstances, is not so easy.
No, but that's been one of the nice features of our interaction over these years, because we haven't always agreed with one another, have we?
We often haven't agreed with one another.
But yet, we've managed to kind of, through kind of find some kind of concord through conciliation, or simply agreeing to differ, but not letting that affect the kind of, the bedrock of our respect for one another.
But I think it's the key thing, is that in a truthful communication, you can recognise that you may be disagreeing, you may be taking polar aspects, but you can see that there is a germ of truth, in what you're being presented. And we start with the premise that, well, I certainly do, that what each one of you is saying or doing or believing is worth me taking seriously. Even if I don't agree with it, it's worth reflecting on.
Yeah.
And the same way you pick up, a book or something, there's something in here for me. And if we approach our interaction with the wider world at that level, then it's the highest common denominator. If we approach it at the other level, is that I already know everything or you know nothing, then it puts us still in communication, but at the lowest or at a lower common denominator.
Another thing I've noticed about our relationship is well, certainly with you, it's always been good-humoured. You and I have you. But come out the other side because we've worked in the interests of the collective, always.
Well, that's the key thing. Is that I may not agree with you, but certainly I would take that apart as that I didn't agree with that, but it's worth reflecting on, and maybe I came to agree with it, or maybe we nutted it out. But that's one of the other things, is that how do you get smooth pebbles? You've got to get those jagged edges and rub them up on something.
And have fun doing it.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the things I always recall about you is when I threatened to send a student home at our expense. I thought you were going to fall into the swimming pool.
We were in South America.
But I think that those sort of laughs carry you through.
Oh, you just did that for a laugh.
No, I didn't. I was deadly serious.
So whereabouts in South America did this take place?
Oh, it was so funny. It was, where was it? It was somewhere in Mexico, wasn't it?
It was close to the Pyramid of the Magician, because at the time we were having this conversation with a challenging person, there were 3 other students stuck at the top of a very steep pyramid. Climb up, climb up, climb up. Ooh, it's a long way down, and it's getting dark, and it's raining. Ooh. It used to be, going back before our time, a challenge to find a spiritual path. Now, there's any number of them. The challenge is to discern and commit. And again, that becomes so challenging in this idea of a collective environment. So we want to follow a spiritual path. We all want to connect to the highest common denominator. This is the one, this is the one, this is the one. And you're left with which one is better than another. And we know that no one is better. The one that you choose to follow and commit is the one for you. But it then becomes very difficult to give equal credence to other people being as equally committed to a different path or practice.
Well, I think it's interesting at the moment is a lot of people use spiritual involvement as an excuse to run away from their life. And it won't do that at all. It'll integrate everything more, what's the word? It'll meld everything together so it will reflect to you where you are trying to escape and where you are trying to fight. And until you could find a still place in between, you're not going anywhere. You won't even be taking the next step. So I think that the idea that people have that spirituality is a love and light, let's sit in a retreat house, long gone. More likely to be in the wilds of, I don't know, wherever. Were you going to say something?
Well, I mean, I think that people are more sophisticated now, and that they understand initially, or they soon learn that that the spiritual path really is about core inner process, and that they have to meet those challenges. And wherever they do that, whether that's in their house or at the top of the pyramid in Mexico, the work has to be done. You can't actually sidestep it.
The Aquarian age, which we used to be saying, wake up, the Aquarian age is coming, and now it's here. And you said, Guru, a few minutes ago, the polarity that we're looking at now. And I was thinking that last year the word was post-truth, but I'm feeling that this year we're in post-democracy. Is that democracy works when you have a majority, but when things are split 50-50, then there no longer is a clear majority. And democracy works when you accept the will of the majority. But now if the will of the majority is 1% more, then you kind of feel empowered by your minority, and we're just as good as you are, plus you're supported by your collective group, around the world, or on your social media connection. You can left like, okay, well, what you're doing is okay, but in 4 years' time or 2 years' time or whatever it is, we're going to put it all right. And that obviously isn't going to work. And I think one of the things that we need to wrestle in this time of difficulty is with the fact that the political structures that we've built up in the West have served their time.
Absolutely. And that's because they're all Piscean structures. So they're, absolutely outdated, outmoded, part of a completely different sort of power, kind of centre of gravity, mainly patriarchal, hierarchical. They're kind of not fit for purpose. Now we know that, and that's easy to say. The question is, what is the Aquarian design of a new model? And it looks like, Trudeau in Canada's, created this cabinet in which the demographic of the different ethnicity of the country is reflected in the cabinet, which is wonderful. But there's a whole lot of work to do to design new models for this.
It's one of those things where you can't say this is the solution. And as someone said to me a long time ago, but it resonated very strongly, is that the problem with an Aquarian anything is that we've never had one before, so we don't know what it looks like.
Yeah, so we're designing it. Yeah.
But equally, we don't know when we look at our children what they're going to land up doing or being. And we just hope that with a reasonable foundation, they will find their way in their diverse fields. Now, when they have, and they're very successful at it, they can come together with respect and regard for each other. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think that's how we'll set up our new governments. So in a way, what we did, because it was brave of you to take me on at all, because I didn't have a yogic background.
Well, but there you are. It depends on your definition of yoga, Jude. Most people think yoga is being a human pretzel. Well, yes, there are postures in many forms of yoga, but Kundalini is not based on posture and asana. And in a wider sense, you're a very good example of a yogini, because you're about integration, looking into the mirror, elevating consciousness, serving.
Yeah. Sorry, your life since I've known you has been a practical definition of a yogi.